heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him. Or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, 'Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce.' But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord.' But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Yikes. That was legit the first word out of my mouth when I read the lectionary gospel text assigned for this Sunday. Yikes. Not that this is a bad text. Actually, the more time I've spent with it this week, the more I've been able to see that it sort of rocks. But at first glance, from the time and place and worldview that we are in, this seemingly isolated little speech is a doozy. I want to tell you a little about basic Lutheran preaching philosophy. In class, we are told that all good Lutheran sermons should skillfully balance law and gospel. In this case, law refers to that which convicts us, the commands that we fail to live up to, the brokenness of our world and of ourselves. The gospel, on the other hand, is literally the good news that glimmers up through the cracks of our brokenness, that we are made, known, and so very loved by a God who is with us and redeems us, even when the law says we haven't earned it. So the preacher will sit with the text and start to parse out what in the text feels like law, what is, and what feels like gospel, what could be, should be, will be. My professors say that a good Lutheran sermon will blend these well, maybe sprinkling in some Greek or Hebrew translations, charming anecdotes, corny jokes, but the key is that you always end with gospel. You always make sure that people walk away with good news, that they are loved and made right and whole with God through Jesus. So here I am, ready to suss out some good old Lutheran-style law and gospel. I crack open the Bible app on my iPad, and the word that leaves my mouth is yikes. Not a great start to sermon writing. This is when I would usually turn to my trustiest preaching podcast, but they all basically say a lot of the same stuff. This little bit of the Sermon on the Mount is so law-heavy, basically listing off all the reasons why we should be thrown into hell, not to mention some questionable sexual ethics by today's understandings. So where are we supposed to find gospel, good news, in this? What wisdom can this text offer Zion Lutheran Church at about 11:24 on Super Bowl Sunday? Well, the gospel stuff isn't super clear, so maybe we can just start with what we can find. A whole lot of law. Now, law isn't a bad thing at all. Law prompts us towards righteousness. It can be pretty easy to think of law and righteousness as this endless checklist of things to do or not do, but that's not really what it's for. Righteousness isn't a thing that you do, it's a thing that you are. It's not about doing the right things and not doing the wrong things. It's about being in a right relationship with God and God's good creation. And I wonder if that's exactly what Jesus is getting at here. He speaks in this pattern structure. You've heard it said, but now I tell you. You've heard it said, but now I tell you. Basically, you think the law means this, but there's really something over here that you're not seeing. You have heard it said, you shall not murder, but if you walk around with enough hate in your heart to start a car, you can go ahead and pat yourself on the back for literally not killing someone, but you've really missed the whole point of that commandment in the first place. And now you're in hell. Not like the eternal hellfire damnation sort of thing, but you're in your own little personal hell, where you feel so far away from the love of the divine and the love of your neighbors because all of that hate gets in the way. But Jesus says you don't have to stay there. You deserve better. I want you to have better. He uses a few more examples, and honestly, a lot of them don't even feel super applicable here and now. There's stuff about burnt sacrifice and oaths and plucking out your eye. He talks about something called divorce that doesn't really have anything to do with our modern understandings of divorce. It was really more about property than relationships. But at the heart of it all, he is teaching us how to treat each other, how to live well in community, how to be whole humans. You can't just pride yourself on not killing someone or not committing adultery and then go on your merry way and actually think that you are experiencing the deep love and peace of living in communion with God and God's good people. That's not the point of the law, and that won't pull you out of your hell. But if we look around and recognize that there isn't a single person who God doesn't love, that God didn't create carefully, who bears the image of the divine, our mind shifts and our heart shifts and we shift. Someone who lives deeply in this way naturally won't murder or otherwise explicitly harm someone, but they also won't speak poorly of others or harbor resentment or objectify someone, shame someone, use someone, break their promises, or fail to own their mistakes. And when we fall short of any of this, because honestly, what human actually lives like this all the time, Jesus gives us another way forward. He calls us towards reconciliation. In true reconciliation, we don't just apologize for the offense, but we genuinely bring an open heart to engage in dialogue and to seek restoration. It's hard work, but it's worth it. God desires for us to be in good relationship with one another. And when conflicts in our relationships are unresolved, other areas of our lives will start to lose balance. Broken relationships may separate us from one another and by extension from their creator and our creator. Even when our intent is genuine or without malice, the impact on others may still be devastating, and our pride may make us resist true reconciliation. But in this text, Jesus gives us permission to even leave worship in order to go reconcile ourselves to someone we may have harmed. That if we remember there is something to be resolved, it matters way more to God that we are made right with our neighbor than for us to have proper or uninterrupted worship. So Jesus says, get up and go. As far as he's concerned, the sooner we experience the peace of reconciliation, the better. So I guess if any one of us decides to get up and walk out and tend to something right now, that would be just fine. But I mean, we always have the option to stick around and soak up even more Jesus. That certainly can't hurt. But at the end of the day, as Christians, we are called to build bridges, not walls. That's the end goal here. This is who Jesus is asking us to be by listing off all this stuff. And some of the language here might come off as antiquated or harsh, but the message beneath it all is a call to hard love. Because in this hard love for others, we might also uncover God's deep, abundant love for us. And if we just get this dumb list of do's and don'ts out of our heads and just strive to live in love with God and God's good people, then we might recognize the fullness of beauty and wonder that exists around us and in us. Jesus knows our hell, and this seemingly abrasive gospel reading shows us that Jesus knows that a good life, a whole life, a gospel life, cannot happen without dwelling in loving community. So when we're looking around and saying, I did everything right, I checked all the boxes, or maybe I didn't check all the boxes, but I'm a good person, and when I go to church, I'm told I'm beloved, why do I still feel like this? Jesus uses this iteration of the law to encourage us to dwell even deeper in loving community. This is the gift, that we might come to know the mysterious nature and the unfathomable affection of a triune communal God through the people sitting around us and the ones miles and miles, but also just a phone call away, the ones who formed us and got us here, and the ones we'll never meet, but we know their love through their service and advocacy. God gives us God's very best, God's own beloved people. And when we resist the temptation of hurting and hating and objectifying and using and hiding from people, and we just see them and treat them as God's beloved people, they can open us up to remember that we are God's beloved too. Our very existence in beloved community shines a light on God's deep and abounding love for us. And for a text that seems like a whole lot of law at first glance, that could actually be some pretty good news. Thanks be to God.